Hi and welcome. In this video lesson we're going to learn how to create a pivot table. You can modify a pivot table, you can apply a filter to a pivot table, and you can insert a slicer into a pivot table that will allow you to additionally sort and filter some data. So pivot tables are based on a range of data. First we have to have some data. I've created some data here, and this data we have several headers, so name, ID, location, position are some of our headers, and it runs through, and I have 93 records. Before you can create pivot tables that are accurate, first you have to delete any duplicate records that might exist. So in this case we're going to delete some duplicates, allow Excel to look for duplicates and then delete duplicates for us. To do this, I'll start by selecting the Data tab. And in the Data Tools group of the Data tab, we have a button here called Remove Duplicates. When I select that, Excel's asking me to check all the fields for duplicates. I'm going to leave all those checked by default and say OK. And now we'll see Excel's found 4 values that were duplicated and removed them. It will only remove absolute duplicates. For instance, if you had someone with the last name Martin and another person last name Martin, but the other fields were not duplicated, it would not remove that. When we go down to the bottom now, we had 93 records. You can see now we only have 89. So I'm ready to begin in earnest to create my pivot table. I'll select the Insert tab in Excel. I'll select the Pivot Table button. Excel's asking me where to put the pivot table and also which range or where the data is located to select from. So my data is in row A3 through I-89. That's the correct date. You'll see it's highlighted as it's blinking. This is the blinking marquee. I want to stick this data in a new worksheet rather than the existing worksheet, and I'll say OK. And now, here's where my pivot table will go once created, but the wizard, this area over here, this fields window, allows me to choose what data to put into the pivot table. So in this data, I want to select and put in the location. When I put a check mark, Excel automatically populates it wherever it believes it should go, which is the rows field. I can sort these by position, which I'd like to do. I have agent and manager. I want to know who's selling more. I want to sort by month. And I also want to look at the sales because that's the value or dollars amount. Now this particular table, although created, isn't very useful to me because I still have to scroll around and look at some other rows and cells to get to what I'm looking for. In this case, I want to move some of these fields to the columns. I can drag, highlight, and drag the location to the columns, and now notice my fields have been repopulated from rows to column headers. I can also select and move the months over to the columns or take them out altogether. So if I take a location, for instance, and drag it, you'll see the X is highlighted while the mouse is still held down. Let go, and that's completely removed. If removed, it's not gone. All you have to do is simply go back up to the fields box and select that data again, and it will populate for us. So now I have July, August, and September data. It is sorted. I have a grand total data as well. Excel put that column in for me, and these are sorted by location as well as position. So agent and manager are my 2 positions. Notice though, the dollars do not appear here. This data looks like numerical data rather than currency, so I can change the value setting or the field setting for the value. I'll select over here in the right under Sum of Sales, select Value Field Settings button. I want to number format that data, so I'll change that to currency with no decimal places and select OK. And OK once more, and all of that data will be reformatted to display in numerical currency. When I have data and I want to possibly discuss, for instance, you might take this to a manager's meeting, the different kinds of data or perhaps the different locations, I put something called a slicer into the data, and I can easily insert those. Just select Insert over on the far right side of the ribbon, you'll select the slicer button. And you have these slicer options to choose how you want to slice up the data. Slicer simply highlights some data and hide the other data temporarily. So I'd like to highlight and slice the positions as well as the, locations. Now, because these are separate in columns and rows, Excel will give me two different slicers. You can see the position slicer here, the location slicer here, and I can choose either or both or just one. So I'd like to highlight the Los Angeles data first by selecting the Los Angeles button on the slicer. Everything else is hidden. And I'd also like to look at just the manager data for that slicer. In addition, you can unslice the data. So if I select the Remove Slice button from the location data, you'll see I have all of the manager data for every location here. I can slice and dice at will. Anytime you want to remove the slice, simply click the Remove Filter button. Alright, thanks. Welcome for the next video where we'll learn how to make pivot charts from the pivot table.